Hello, David here at merchantaccounts.ca with our first merchantaccounts.ca payments vlogcast, vodcast. I don't know what you call it when it's a podcast with video. But anyways, we're here to talk about navigating e-commerce in 2021. And I have Fergal Harris from Numinix with me today, and we're going to chat about how to go about picking an e-commerce platform. So, Fergal, why don't you start by introducing yourself to the viewers and telling them a little bit about your background?
Thanks, David, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Fergal. I'm an e-commerce professional based here in Vancouver. My background is in construction. When I was younger, in a family business, learning a lot of aspects of the whole business, and then onwards into e-commerce now, where I've done my master's in e-commerce. I found out a lot about the industry as a whole and where the different aspects of the business side fit into the technical parts around e-commerce. And now I'm working for two or three companies in Vancouver here, sharing a full service e-commerce experience with web development, design, digital marketing, and a little bit of an e-commerce platform itself. That's a bit about me.
Perfect. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you as my first guest because you have quite a diverse, like you touch a lot of stuff, marketing and you SEO, but also I know Numinix works on a lot of e-commerce platforms. What are some of the most popular platforms these days?
Yeah. Well, obviously, if you know anything about e-commerce, you've probably heard of Shopify.
Yes.
It's been the lowest barrier to entry to the industry. People can go there, they can put in their credit card details, buy a domain, and upload an image, upload a price, upload a weight, and then start selling their product online no matter what it is. So that's been incredibly popular for people trying to get into e-commerce of late. We also have WooCommerce, which is built on top of the WordPress platform, which is traditionally a blogging platform, but WooCommerce is a cart plugin that turns it into an e-commerce platform.
Now I was told, because I reached out to WooCommerce last year, that by installations, it's the most popular shopping cart platform on earth. Do you think that's accurate? Like by installs or by merchants running it?
It was last year or prior to 2020 for sure, and most of 2020.
Okay.
And then WooCommerce definitely had the biggest chunk of the market for sure.
Okay.
Then Shopify started kind of chopping away at that. And you'd look at the different sides of businesses. Obviously, you have platforms like BigCommerce or Magento who would go after enterprise level.
Yep.
They may do more in revenue than a platform like WooCommerce, but WooCommerce would have a lot more merchants at a smaller kind of ticket.
Because it's free. Because there's no barrier to entry at all, other than you got to get it working.
Exactly. You look at, I've mentioned Zencard and I mentioned Shopify. They're on both ends of the spectrum. Zencard is fully open source, where Shopify is a hosted platform. You don't really need to know web development to get on it. And then the rest of them are kind of dotted in between. If you kind of had a matrix, you'd have WooCommerce somewhere in the middle, Shopify on one end, Zencard the other, and then BigCommerce, Magento, just kind of dotted around. They offer you open APIs, or you can install it on your own server, or you can have kind of as much hosted as you want.
Exactly, Fergal. I think we just kind of stumbled into the whole point of this topic that we're tackling in our first discussion here, because it's really about choosing platforms, and that's all the way back. I'm not even talking currently. A zillion years ago, a zillion e-commerce years. I guess a zillion in e-commerce years is like 15 years or more. But so back in the day, it would be like, do I go with something that I pay for, or do I go with something open source? I guess, or do I build it myself? And so maybe I'm going to kind of start there. So let's think about a typical basic e-com merchant. I'm not talking about Sony or some huge merchant. If you're starting an e-commerce project, you're either an established smaller business making your foray into e-com, or you're a pure startup. Does picking the cart, can any cart get you going decently, or is researching and picking the right cart even important in what you'd call version 1 of your business, when you know that you have growth in front of you?
That's exactly it, David. Like, you hit the nail on the head. Do you know what your growth is going to be like? Have you done your research, or are you starting up a business from scratch with a product that you like and you're passionate about. Let's say you're a small merchant that already has a brick and mortar store, you have a following. You could confidently say, okay, I'll put my products online and reach out to my existing customers. You can do very smart things, as you know, with the payment terminals at the till and start collecting people's email addresses. And then you can then email your customers that have already purchased for you and direct them to a new website that you've just built. Therefore, kind of touching them on more points or getting more touch points with your customers for sales. What kind of business would you have in mind if you were starting from scratch? And maybe we can take an example.
Oh, well, a widget store. No, okay, let me come up with something good. Okay, you know what I'm into? This is just a personal thing. I am totally into all this electric mobility devices. So I have a one wheel. For anybody that doesn't know, it's like an electric skateboard. I also have an electric unicycle, which is just a more powerful version of a one wheel. I also have an electric hydrofoil, which is about the world's coolest thing. It's an electric surfboard that flies on a hydrofoil over the water. Like if I was a kid, these all would have cost $1 million and run for 4 minutes and it would have weighed 400 pounds. Like that's how far in the future I feel we're living sometimes. So let's say that I'm doing a high ticket product because this stuff isn't cheap. It's niche. The shipping is a problem for sure because you can't ship the batteries on a plane. So there's going to be, I'm just making stuff up for you. And because it's so high ticket, you want to be careful about fraud. You want to be validating your orders or scrubbing it. Now I'm thinking like a payments guy. There's a lot of other stuff to think about too that I probably don't touch day to day, like managing your inventory. So I think that's enough. Why don't you run with that? And I'm curious to see what you come up with here.
So it sounds like you want a niche electronics store. Like you'll see a lot of electronics store popping up where they have a Shopify and they may have a drop shipper and they connect the drop shipping software to their Shopify store and they're away. And they're doing that and so is everybody else and their dog.
It's like a commodity business where you're trying to make a couple pennies. I've never been good at that. Exactly. I don't understand that business model. And to be honest, I personally would never want to do it. So let's go in the niche direction.
Yeah, it's perfect. You kind of have a niche. You have a sporting electronic goods store for people that are passionate about not just maybe surfing, cycling, bicycling, skateboarding, unicycles. You have it all there. So you build your brand around that, and you would likely want to differentiate yourself because of that. So let's say you did want to get on Shopify because your startup costs are going to be quite low. You want to save some money for inventory because, as you said, it's high ticket items. So unless you have a massive budget, you're not going to build a massive website with all the bells and whistles that you won't need for 5 years and also have a warehouse full of stock that you haven't got any marketing budget to sell. So you'd want to be, depending on what kind of budget you have, let's just say a small budget is $1,000.
Wait, what's that $1,000 for? Because that's a tiny budget. I mean, I like respecting budgets. You know, I remember being a startup. Every dollar matters. So I don't want to be dismissive, but I want to be clear. Is that $1,000 for the whole website? Because that seems like...
Why don't we say you have $10,000 a month to run the business?
10 a month. Okay. Or okay. Anyways, let's run with that because that's a serious business because that's $120,000 a year. That's more than a lot of startups, but it's also, this is a real business. Okay, sure. Let's run with that. That's good.
Let's say you have $5,000 to $10,000 a month to start this business.
I like it. Yeah.
And that's as a result of having a full-time job and working hard and maybe getting some family and friends involved to help you realize your dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and off the bat, a good website can cost you over $10,000. So yes. Right away, you don't want your first 3 or 4 months budget blown on a website.
And you're talking if it was custom designed, graphic designer coded, and the marketers and the SEO and the copywriters. So you're saying, like, don't spend all of your money on the first 5 minutes of the job here, basically.
So when we have a good budget, we would start, and starting from scratch, you got to start with the logo. You make sure that a company has a good, catchy, well-designed logo that people will notice. And then from that logo, designers can pull obviously the color palette, the rest of the design, the flow of the site. So it's a journey that a designer would go on, and a lot of people on the front end and in design will understand that. And then when a designer has that, the way we operate is we have our software that the designer designs in a software, and then that software has all the coding for the front end, such as the pixels, the hex codes, and the front end developer can take them and turn them into a website. So because we use that software, you kind of see your design before it's actually any development is done. You see exactly how it's going to look. And then the back-end developers come in and make any features work that need to interact with the back-end.
Now,
So-
when you're talking about back-end, just so, because I want to run, I love this example. In fact, that was great advice about come up with the logo, because that is your color scheme. And I also, there's so many things I want to talk about, because back in the day with e-commerce, it was like, is it safe to buy online? I mean, nobody talks about that anymore because everybody knows it is. I mean, maybe if you deal with really elderly people or people that wear tinfoil hats or something, I don't know. But in reality, nobody challenges that. But you still have a trust issue. If your website doesn't look credible, people have a fear of purchasing. And so getting the logo right, the color scheme right, the design right, I very much agree with you, very important. But then you segued into the coding, the development, the back end. Are you talking, in this scenario, are you custom building a website? Are we talking about a platform? Where are we going with, you got the design, okay, let's say you got a PDF file, a Photoshop, a PSD file. Where do you go now?
So the PSD file is the same as the software that we use, except the software is more integrated, easier to use, easier to share, all hosted. So you got a PSD file, or we use that software, and then the front end developer comes in and uses the front end code. So we use HTML, CSS, Vue, JavaScript, all of these front end codes that developers can use to make a good website. A lot of it is built if we're still talking about Shopify here, we can't do any back end, we can use plugins or we could build them. The front end code, however, is specific to Shopify. They have their own language called Liquid, where you learn how to build the different things in their language. So a developer will build that on Shopify for you.
So in this example, is Shopify the platform? Because that's where I was getting lost, because I have a design, and then you kept talking about the software and the platform, but I'm not clear. I know Photoshop, but you said we're not using Photoshop.
I'm sorry. So I'm trying to walk through the process where if we had a larger budget when we clearly don't. So because of the lower budget, we would pick a hosted platform like Shopify.
Okay, now
you can also do this on WordPress and still have a similar experience, but you'd still need a development budget every month, but you're not quite there yet. So Shopify can start at $39 a month, where if you want to have you're a startup, you don't have much money in the budget for a developer on staff, so you'd likely outsource to a company such as Numinix, who would charge at a minimum $400 a month for 2 to 3 hours of development work. And if something breaks, then that budget could be double. Won't break on Shopify, might break on WooCommerce, most likely will break on Zencart. So again, you're going back to your matrix of where you are. So it's risk versus reward. If you take a risk on a more open source platform, and the reason I'm saying this is because you've brought up a good example for shipping. Now, you can't ship them on airplanes, so there's a shipping rule that needs to be created to prevent next day air delivery if that's a service. You can turn it off, but there might also be other restrictions that you might need to add to your shipping rules. So I do have an example of that, and I do think that you'll understand this one. So we had a client that was on Zencart that moved to Shopify, very successful furniture store in the US, and they sell furniture. And with furniture comes nightmare for shipping. So they have a customizable sofa, let's say. You can buy it in a 2-seater love seat, in a 3-seater with a shay-long, or a 3-seater with no shay-long. And that can be shipped in, let's say, Montana for $100. It can be shipped down to Florida for $350. It varies with all the different shippers, all the different services. and whatever else is in the customer's cart. All these shipping options need to be configured. They can mostly be configured in Shopify. However, when you make all your choices as a customer, so you choose the Shay Long with a 3-seater,
Mm-hmm.
Shopify doesn't create that product until after you add it to your cart. So the product doesn't exist until you create it, and then Shopify's backend creates a product, adds it to your cart.
Oh, because it's
So
like made up of a bunch of parts or options. You're almost
that's how
custom
Shopify works,
assembling it. Okay.
right? So you're with me there. So you've just created a new product with no admin help. The only thing you have to go on is it's in a category, and that category has a default shipping option. Now, this sofa might not match the default shipping option that everything else matches. So you'd have a shipping rule for that. So if you buy this sofa without customization and the product's there, it might have its own custom rule. Don't ship to Florida or charge extra for Florida, but something else in that category might not need that. However, when you create the new product, it doesn't know which one to take on as its default shipping option. And because it's created at the cart, there's no human intervention to say, oh, this should be this option.
May I cut in with a question there for Gald? Because this is
Sure.
fascinating to me, and I can't be the only one thinking this. So this is something that you arrived at because clearly there was a problem, and you've analyzed it, you understand the problem, and you found the solution. So I'm going to ask a very simple question. In most e-commerce things, you'd have a couch, which would be a product, and then you have an option. It's like Shay's Lounge on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. But you're not doing it that way. You're not doing one product with a bunch of options. You're assembling options into a SKU or a product. Why was that the approach? What was the problem that caused you to take that approach? What did it solve?
So this is always how it worked when the customer's on Zencaster. So it was never a problem before. It's a great experience for the customer to be able to choose their sofa. And I believe Zencaster probably had a product or a SKU option for each outcome, and it was never an issue. But when you move to Shopify, Shopify doesn't operate like that. You have to work within what Shopify gives you. So that's why this caused a problem. And there is a solution. It's just more expensive than having just stayed on Zencaster and improving it better than Shopify can be. So you always have to take the good with the bad. This customer also had a point of sale, which is good. Shopify has their own point of sale. One of the things I'd always say is that you probably shouldn't go with a point of sale that gives you an e-commerce platform, and you shouldn't go with an e-commerce platform that gives you a point of sale. You should find the best e-commerce platform and the best point of sale and try and integrate them.
I totally agree. It's like that. You can apply that even broader. It's like, in fact, we could apply that to e-commerce software. You don't pick this. When I say it, it's so obvious. You don't pick the e-commerce software with the most features. You pick the one that's best at selling what you've got to sell. And you just explain that in an even more specific example, because otherwise it's like, hey, you could find one that includes web hosting, you can find one that includes a maid service, and they'll, do your laundry every 3 days. But one's got nothing to do with the other. So why don't you just get what's actually best at what you're trying to solve?
Yeah, nobody knows everything.
Yes.
Except
exactly.
for me.
Well, that's good, because I know nothing, so we balance each other. There we go.
No, it is very difficult, and it's about having the foresight to know that if I go with this, is it gonna keep me restricted in the future, or should I go with this now that it opens up my options when eventually this may happen or may not, and will it get me there in the short term, or can I afford it? So what I'm doing here is bouncing between Shopify is completely closed off and Zencaster is completely open. Maybe somewhere is what we're doing is landing in the middle, like WooCommerce.
Right. So, yeah, there's so much to go over here. One of the things that I want to ask is, okay, so you've really picked Shopify as your kind of the example, and there's lots of them for a hosted cart platform. Another one could be BigCommerce. Another one could be 3D Cart. Another one could be blah 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 blah. What are some of the? I'm going to throw you on the. I'm going to just ask what I think is an interesting question.
Super.
What are your 5 favorite e-commerce platforms? I'm not even qualifying it. It could be hosted, it could be this, it could be that. What are your 5 favorite ones that you always consider using?
Okay, well, I'll give you four, but I
Okay,
can't tell
four
you the
works.
fifth.
4 works.
um, so WooCommerce is definitely up there.
Okay. Is that because it's so open?
Yeah, it's so open. It gives you can customize every part of it. It does have a core team working on WooCommerce, and it's best for you not to customize their core code, so that when they do provide updates for security and for new features, that you can get them, not overwrite your code or have to do a lot of merging,
Mm-hmm.
like their new code with your new code because you customize it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also got thousands upon thousands of developers creating plugins for the platform.
Yeah.
So the features are there. They might cost $100 a year, which is very little uh, compared to you've already paid that just to be on Shopify.
Mm-hmm.
You might be paying more if you're getting big enough to have all these new features. So WooCommerce is really right in the middle of open, but it's got an element of support for it, just from the free plugins and everybody's. WooCommerce works is free, but they charge a premium for a lot of extras that a lot of people will pay, and that's how they're supported. So it's a very good way to get your feet wet. And then after WooCommerce, you would look at something like, to me, my train of thought goes, you're growing now. So you look to something like BigCommerce, who is a more stable hosted platform with an open API, which is basically a set of features that allows you to connect to most parts of their system. Where Shopify's API is quite closed off, BigCommerce has 91% open API. So you can build pretty much what you want, except for a few 9% of their platform.
I have to ask a question around that because,
Yeah.
so my approach in life is often not the right approach. I mean, we're all human, right? But I really like not being painted into a corner. In fact, I still have the tendency to want to custom code everything, which is a nightmare because you can, like, it's so much more unnecessary work. But at the same time, it can be good in some situations. But anyways, so the idea of being on Shopify, which I know is restrictive, uh, is a challenge. And if BigCommerce is open or very reasonably open, to me, the word that just pops in my mind is like, I want to ask Fergal if BigCommerce is better. And I know that that is not really a correct question to ask because it's a broad question. There's so many things to consider. But by and large, if one's open and one's not, isn't the open one, broadly speaking, better? Because even if it's maybe not as fast, or let me just make a simple example. Maybe it's a little harder to upload a product or something like that, but is it not a better investment for your business that you won't be painted into a corner? That's where my mind goes. I'd love to know what you think about that.
From my experience with BigCommerce, it does run into some of the same issues as Shopify does, where you grow to a certain point and something is not standard from your business, not out of the box, and it's kind of hard to build. It's not supported by BigCommerce, and then you do end up having to invest heavily in your own dev team,
Mm-hmm.
or a third party to build that for you. And if it's not there, you'll have to pay for it, basically. And it's the same for both platforms. With Shopify, it's hard to say. You could end up paying $25 a month per plugin for 10 plugins, an extra $250 a month on top of whatever they're charging you, just to have 10 extra features that should be standard or could be standard in another platform.
Right.
So the best practice to do is to actually list out all the features you require now, what you might require in the medium term, and what you might require in the long term, and try and match the best platform based on that, because it could completely vary by business.
Okay. Well, that totally makes sense. And I hijacked my own question there. So, and you've given me 2. You promised me 4. So we got WooCommerce. We got BigCommerce. What's the next?
Yeah.
What's the next blank commerce?
Ooh, after that, I like the open cart ones. I do the open source ones like OpenCart and ZenCart. However, it's very difficult for the industry now, because I feel that the industry is moving a lot more towards really slick, cool front end developers, and having a hosted platform or a headless e-commerce platform below you so you can build on top of it, and moving away from the open source back-end customization, just because of how prominent that they all are in the industry. So it's hard to stick with the. We'll always stick with the open source, and we'll always support it as long as we can. But it's hard to put them up there with the rest of the platforms that are really pulling out all the stops. Like if you look at SAP. SAP claim that they have an e-commerce platform that does more volume in sales volume than Shopify and Amazon.
But is that even a fair point? Because so my friend is an SAP consultant. It's a huge old platform. So the companies that are on it are going to be huge old businesses. Well, if you're huge and you're old, it means you do a lot of sales. Like Kellogg's. I don't know that they're on SAP, but that company's around. Like it's going to do a lot of volume. Isn't that a skewed point to their benefit?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they want to charge $2,000 a month for a headless platform that you build on top for the privilege of saying that. So yeah, it's probably more marketing, but the commerce is there, the sales are there.
So it's capable.
It's going through. Yeah, absolutely. But for me, the third one, it's coming back to me now because I'd have to say Zencart, just because of how much it's taught me personally, how customizable it is. Like I know more about e-commerce than I would if I was dealing with Shopify every day, just because I have clients on Zencart. When they come to me with a question, because that's my role, I need to answer the questions they have and find them new features and grow their business. But when they come to me with a question on Zencart, immediately my thought goes to, okay, how can we do this? Where if they come to me on Shopify with a question, it's like, well, let's look at what plugins are there first. Then we can discuss the budget of what we need to do if there's no plugins there, or if we can even do that.
That makes sense.
So I have to put Zencart up there for that. And WooCommerce is the same, but Zencart is just, and it's still going strong. I still talk to people every week that have just started into e-commerce and they downloaded and installed Zencart, and they really like how it works, even though it looks like it's from the 1990s, because it is. But people still love it. It gives you a sense of freedom. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want, and it's still a cart. It still will allow you to check out, and it still has templates and themes that you can install and upload products. So
it does the stuff. It does the stuff. Yeah. Is Zencart not an offshoot or derivative of OS Commerce? I think
that could be before my time.
Yeah, I think that because OS Commerce was open source, and I think someone modified it and created Zencart, but I could be totally wrong. But I have to ask a question. I'm going back to something. You've used the term twice. Or three times in this conversation. I've heard this term. People have explained it to me before, but I have not absorbed it. What is headless e-commerce?
Okay. Headless e-commerce is basically your back-end system. So we've spoken about the front end and the back end. And it's kind of like how Shopify works too, where they don't give you access to the back end. But it is a full e-commerce platform minus the catalog side that the customer sees. So you don't have a theme, you don't have products, you don't have anything really other than anything on the front end. You don't have text or anything. You got to build all that yourself and integrate that with the headless platform that's being provided. It's
a custom front end hooked onto. It's like this. I don't want to build an add to cart function.
It could be a custom back end too. You could build it out also. It is what you make of it.
And here's a good point to the typical viewer. If you're a small or mid-sized business, you're trying to pick out an e-commerce shopping cart platform. I've been doing e-commerce and payments for 20 years. Fergal's been doing it forever. All he does is work on platforms, and the two of us are like, we're not exactly clear what headless e-commerce is. So if you're confused, don't feel bad. It is a complicated topic, and nobody knows everything. So I love the idea of coming back to that on a future episode.
Thank you.
Let's talk about, I was talking about what carts, but forget about what carts for a second. Are there any features that carts should have that a lot of business owners don't consider? So you might frequently get requests from people who ask for something, or maybe you have clients and you're trying to give them advice, you really should think about this. Like I'll give an example that's probably wrong. You really should think about something that automates the creation of your shipping labels so you don't have to spend so much time shipping stuff or something. But kick that over to you. What features do you think are really important but overlooked?
I mean, that's a great one. And then I know we've really segued away from our budget and our business idea.
I actually even forgot
But
about it. That's terrible, isn't it? Oh my gosh, we're all over the
yeah,
map
but
here.
I'll kind of tie that in now. You'll have your features that will be good for your business processes, like the labels. You don't have to go and print your own label. It'll save you time. And then you'll also have features that might improve sales. So something that if you only had the budget for one feature and you were choosing between that and an abandoned cart plugin, so that if somebody leaves your cart but they put their email address in, you can send them a 10% discount to come back and check out. And that would make you more money than you'd save time with the labels.
You're just abandoning the lost carts here to convert you got traffic, wasn't a sale, let's get them back.
Yeah. Okay. So like 70% of users that get to the checkout don't actually check out.
Is that? Oh, wow. I didn't know that was a statistic. And I'll bet you that would be dependent, obviously, on your category and your industry that you're in. But that is a really interesting statistic. Another statistic.
That's an e-commerce average. And then you look at Shopify, that's a really easy one to kind of talk about. Shopify has that integrated into their platform.
Well, because they have because it's a hosted platform. Hey, Fergal, so listen, I like this thing about starting with coming back to my very cool electric toys business, which, by the way, makes me sound far cooler and far more coordinated than I actually am. I'm not a good surfer or anything like that. In fact, the reason I have an electric e-foil is because I realized that surfing in the real world is just sore shoulders. I don't have the skill for it.
It's hard.
It's so much work. So let's go back to launching this business. So we started, I got a logo designed. I got a graphic designer to come up with a color scheme, design the fonts. Then you said pick the platform, something like Shopify. Maybe instead it's a WooCommerce. I'm going to be the merchant in this role. Okay, so let's role play this. I don't like the idea of being locked into Shopify because I don't like restrictions. Good choice or bad choice, I don't know which that is. So I like more and I don't want to go with Zencar. It's a little too old. And honestly, WooCommerce makes me a little nervous too. So here's the thing, and I think this is a headless e-commerce. I'll tell you what I like. I like shopping carts where it's like I don't want to code an add to cart button because that's been done 10,000 times. And I don't want to do the session tracking or whatever. And I don't want to do the tax logic, and I don't want to do the shipping logic. I want a library that I can leverage so that I can take my design, put it on a website. So I'm going to hire a designer maybe to custom code the homepage. Let's just do it a homepage, a product page, and really it's like the about page, the privacy page, the contact us page. Those are all copies or derivatives of the homepage. So that's mostly recyclable. So if you're with me here, then I'm going to take the product page, and I want to populate in the add to cart button. I am going to insert my own imagery. So I'm not going to call a database for the image. The image is going to be on my server. But when the customer hits add to cart, everything subsequent in the checkout flow is now running on the e-commerce platform. That's my preference. So I know some carts like that are Spree, Foxy Cart, and a bunch that I can't remember the name of. But are you familiar with any carts like that? And if I told you that was my preference, you could even correct me. I'm curious to know what your advice would be to me on my $5,000 to $10,000 a month I have to spend. Well, what are your thoughts based on what I'm giving you to work with here for my electronic toys business?
Yeah, so it sounds like the more you think, the more money you're going to spend.
Yeah, I'm good at that. Yeah.
You just want to be careful there. Like, cost out the options. Like Shopify is the cheapest option, but it'll lock you in, and it could end up being expensive in the long run for you and hard to get away from.
Yeah. And
a big expense to move and to redesign again. Mm-hmm. But that might not be a major problem if you don't invest as much in it at the beginning. So you'd weigh that against if you wanted to start stable and then move on when you have a bigger budget. the headless e-commerce, just to touch on that, you still need to build a cart as far as I'm aware for the most ones that I've seen out there that we work with. You still have to build the cart side of it as well as the product pages and everything
Is
that
it
you
is it
mentioned.
not a library though, where you know what? I'll give you an example. I'll give you a great example. This may not be headless e-commerce, but so I have a rental property, and I use a software platform called ownerreservation.com. Free plug to them. And the reason I used their platform is I was going to build my own calendar, and like I'm actually not good enough, but in my mind, I'm good enough. Yeah, I can. 21 years ago, I was a coder. No problem. I can pick this up. I started working on it, and I was like, why? Why would I do this? Even forget for the fact that I'm a slow, poor coder, just tinkering on this as like a hobby project. Take that out of it. Why would I, even as an advanced coder, build a calendar that tracks availability when that's already been done? So I went out and started looking at platforms. And I had the website, I had my design and the write-up of the property as a vacation property and photos, distance to the beach, all that type of stuff. And I was able to take their calendar widget, drop the calendar widget in, and when you clicked on your dates, right in the widget, it's like click here to proceed with your order, and it connected to my merchant account, our merchant account for merchantaccounts.ca. The payment gateway that I was using for that is Cygate. And so I was basically able to take their stuff and drop it into my custom website. So when you say you have to build the cart, it's because I had to incorporate the widget, I had to customize it, I had to include the JavaScript files and whatever else you need to do. Is that what you see when you work on those type of platforms? Or because if you're building the add to cart button too, what exactly, it's headless nothing. What is the headless part powering?
Yeah, this is something that definitely I'd need to research before we come back into it.
Okay,
But
no problem.
the essentially the headless part, the headless e-commerce platform will take the transactions, take the data, and store it in a database for you, and then give it back to you when you need to use it. But
Okay.
the act of build, you still have to build the cart. Whereas a hosted platform like Shopify, BigCommerce, they give you the cart. That's why you go to a hosted platform. If you want more than a hosted platform, then it's a headless e-commerce platform. But a lot of these hosted platforms are actually headless e-commerce platform with an e-commerce platform on top of it.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm curious about is, are most shopping carts bloated these days? I'll tell you why I'm asking that question. I used to commit to shopping cart reviews. Like I've reviewed Shopify and BigCommerce over the years. Most of these companies I used to do writing for. I used to write for Shopify's payments area of their website and stuff like that. And so I would interact with them, right? And the point that I'm making is, if I had committed to them, hey, I want to review your cart for a website, it was always more work than you'd think. But it was always the similar stuff. Does the shipping logic work? How tough is it? And what are these other interesting features? But now, like, I can't commit to that anymore. The programs are too big. Is it bloat, or is it, I guess what I'm asking is, are shopping carts bloated? Do they try to do everything? Do they try to do too much? Or are there some carts that are lean and they do what you need to do and they make it easy to add on only what you need, if that question makes any sense?
So yes, no, and maybe all the answers to your question. So you would look at then a large company that needs a lot of features. If an e-commerce platform is trying to cater to them, then they might have a lot of features in their cart that not a lot of people need, because they're specific to certain industries. So there could be bloat there. Where if you look at a large company like that, might build their own custom e-commerce website, and that's how they keep their checkouts lean. And then on the opposite end, where you have a hosted platform with a checkout that you can't customize, like Shopify's and their basic plan, does the basics with not a lot of bells and whistles. And that's there for conversion optimization. So they put a lot of resources into making sure your cart can convert. But then as you grow, that basic cart that converts well doesn't offer you the opportunity to customize it as much as you could elsewhere.
Well, that's
And then, so I do want to continue on to to WooCommerce, where WooCommerce is all of that. It's trying to cater to everybody, and it's trying to be the best shopping cart experience it can be. And it can end up being a lot of bloat when you get a certain amount of people on the platform, and then your website slows down, and there is no fix. There is no getting away from it. WooCommerce will slow down after 1,200 people on at a time on your site, and then you have to start putting them in a queue to get onto your website, so your website doesn't break due to too many processes.
Right. Interesting. So actually, your audience also plays a role. Performance. What a good problem to have. You have too many customers, it's killing your server.
Yeah. And when at that stage you have a budget to say, well, I'll build my own e-commerce platform, forget the rest of them. But that won't happen to Shopify. But it'll be very hard for you to get onto Shopify, to get that traffic on Shopify. Like one of my clients who I went through all the platforms with, they're a large client. They asked me, how come Kendall Jenner's on Shopify? And it's the answer is simple. It's because Shopify can handle the traffic that she will offer, and she'll be on the top plan they have. But she doesn't need SEO. She doesn't need ads. She doesn't need really much marketing, because she sends out one tweet, and the whole world stops and looks. So for a business to get to that stage, you have a WooCommerce WordPress blog that will get you way more traffic because it's set up as a blog, way more organic traffic, which is the holy grail, than a Shopify would, where your blogging and your SEO, meta titles, metadata is pretty much the same as everybody else's if you install the right plugins.
Yeah, I mean, you just tiptoe. That's one of the reasons that I love custom. Because my background, I mean, a zillion years ago was in online marketing and SEO, and I'm militant in my approach. Like there is no, the way that I describe SEO is picture two people scratching their way across a battlefield. If you can get this much further than the guy next to you, you're higher in the ranking. Like that's, I know it's not literally correct, but that is my approach to SEO, because nobody knows the algorithm. And now, see, now I'm off on another tangent, but nobody knows the algorithm, and it truly is a battle to be as relevant as you can and have the most useful content. And I don't believe in black hat SEO. To any viewers that don't know what that means, there's like sketchy things you can do, like trying to stuff keywords on the page, and I don't believe in that. I just try I just try and do it properly.
Not good. Yeah, we do SEO for our clients, and that's the one thing we try and make very apparent, is that we don't believe in black hat measures. We have a lot of clients that are arguing with us, well, why won't we do this and why won't you do that? And they go off and do it themselves, and then they have a great result for a month, and they say, my traffic's dropped, what happens? Well, Google just released an update and caught you doing what you're doing. Yeah, and like they're nice people. They're just maybe misinformed, or it worked at that time, and they come back to us and we fix it. But in the long run, it's not the right thing to do, and you can lose your traffic overnight, and you can lose your business.
Yeah,
because you want to make a quick buck here or there. So no, I don't agree with that. And going back to what you're saying, like on the battlefield, when you're right, it's a battle to get above the next guy. And if you can imagine, the guy you're battling with is on Shopify. They only have so many tools, and then the rest of their tools are not affordable or not built yet. Where you're on an open source platform and you have all the tools that you want or can build.
Because you're not stuck. You're not boxed in.
It does work into everything else as well, though.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about custom for a second then, because we haven't gone here, and I do believe there is a place for totally raw custom e-commerce websites. Maybe not at $5,000.
That's where the headless comes in.
Yeah.
The headless comes in when you want to do completely custom, but you don't have to worry about the processing side of it or the server side of things.
So have you ever had a client that you were shocked at how successful they were, and it was something to do with the platform? Like either they asked for something or you recommended something and it just worked out so well, like there was an obvious, tangible result because of the decision that was made?
It's hard to say yes, because I put a lot of research into the recommendations that I give to my clients. Mm-hmm. So when we do something, I do have the expectation that it'll work because it's based on the research that I've done. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I always see, and it just vindicates everything when somebody moves to a hosted platform with disregard for SEO. And then you look at their analytics and you see exactly what happens. They see maybe a small jump in sales, or sales stay the same, and they move platform and everything's great. Okay, now I'm on this new platform, I can do more with my with limited admin knowledge, because I can install plugins myself and I won't break the site. So what I see is that they see, let's say, $100,000 a month across the board for the last 6 months. 3 months they're on one platform, 3 months they were on a new platform. And I see their conversion rate skyrocketing because they were on an open source platform and they haven't really invested in design, and that's why they're going to a hosted platform like Shopify. So the conversion rate sometimes doubles, and their organic traffic goes in half or less. And I'm saying, well, that's exactly what happens. You updated your design, perfect. That's what happens when you update your design. You do it for conversion optimization, but you lost SEO traffic. Imagine you had stayed on the same platform and updated your design there. You'd have doubled your sales.
Yeah. Sounds like you're as big a
I say
believer
this
of.
to everybody beforehand, and then they don't believe me until it happens afterwards. And I see the analytics. I'm looking at lines going like this,
Yeah.
or that way. I don't know which way your camera is. And then I'm also looking at conversion rates going up by 100%.
So Fergal, I can tell that SEO is super important to you, and it is absolutely super important to me. Like, it's one of the most important things to our business, and I'm going to ask a question about that, and it's about paid ads, AdWords versus organic SEO. So if I go back a long time, and I mean a long time, so I was paying about between 30 to 75 cents per click for the phrase merchant account or credit card processing, selling our merchant account and credit card processing services. When it went to $1, I was upset. And when it went to 2, I'm like, these guys are crazy. Eventually went to 5 and 10, and I couldn't take it anymore. It was crazy. And I actually don't do pay-per-click anymore. I think it's too expensive. I want to know, for a small startup, is pay-per-click still viable? Like, how that's why SEO is so important to me, because to pay for the traffic, which, by the way, Google has tried to make the like, their ads used to obviously be ads. Now it looks like organic links. You have to really pay attention to what's organic and what's paid. Paid obviously is on top. But is it possible, and is it worth it for a startup to do AdWords, or is it often too expensive?
So it always, again, will depend on your budget and the industry, because obviously you're in a very competitive industry. So when those prices start going up, that could be PayPal burning their millions of dollars in profit every year just to stay relevant, just to stay on top of you and keep everybody down. And you can never really compete with that unless you have the same budget as PayPal.
No, it's like $30 to $50 per click or something. It's like, are you crazy?
So if that's an issue in your industry, then it's absolutely not worth it. However, paid ads can still be worth it, because if you think that, let's say Amazon is another good example, where you sell on Amazon, you also sell on your own store, and you'll see Amazon advertising your product in the paid ads. But they're also doing that for all their products. So the larger companies can't get as deep into what you do, or as technical, maybe they can, but or as kind of relevant as you, or as customized as you can make your own business. So you can find better ways to reach customers and find out what else they're looking for, and be more relevant than a large company that's just throwing money at ads and paying over the top for the common keywords. So if it's an uncommon keyword, or you find out what else people are looking for in the industry, and you get them the traffic through that way, can be worth it, because you can find keywords that are not as expensive as the more common ones, but still garner a lot of traffic, and will still are people that are looking for your business.
Niche keyword is keyword research. You're talking about keyword research, picking a good, profitable niche keyword phrase as opposed to a broad one that everyone's going to be competing on.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand with an expert in digital marketing that wants to learn about your business, which is what Numinix and Trek have on our side. Is that because it's me, and I go into a business and I try and help them with their marketing, their web development and their platform and everything in between e-commerce, that my team also learns about their business. So when you have an AdWords specialist on Trek working for one of my clients, they're also talking to me, they're talking to the client, they're talking to the web developer, so they know a lot about the business. And then we can then bring that into the keyword research we do. We know who they are, we know what their customers are doing. We might not get this with larger people like PayPal. They might say, oh, well, it's just abroad, anybody looking for this. So we can find those niche keywords, we can find those longer tail keywords, get traffic to the site, and always focus on the return, so that if you want to spend $40 a day, we'll get you a decent return on that, as opposed to just trying to get traffic in the door like PayPal.
Right.
So that's where I'd look at the paid ads. It's not always, if it's in an industry that's competitive, it's not always the right idea to go head to head with the big guys. Maybe you want to come up second or third, or maybe you want to find other ways to do it, because people still do their research. If there's not competition, or if there's low competition, then yes, absolutely. It's the highest converting traffic.
Yeah, I love this SEO stuff. We've been everywhere. We've been on picking cart platforms. We've been on like best practices, the designer. We've been budgets and shipping problems and SEO. We've basically covered 1% of launching an e-commerce business. And I think we're going to come back in the next episode and pick up where we left off. But before we do, I am going to ask if there's any particular things that, for someone that's launching their first e-commerce business, like what's something to keep in mind that people would overlook or not think of?
So if you are launching an e-commerce business and you already have a brick and mortar store, make sure you have the resources to actually manage the e-commerce store. A lot of the times it could require additional resources than what you're already doing with an e-commerce, with a brick and mortar store. And failure to do that could lead to slower processing times, products that are out of stock being sold on the website, and you get bad reviews. People could go hit your Google reviews for your store, and then you could see a lot of your online traffic kind of decrease because of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's one that's something I'm actually good at. It doesn't matter. I don't know if you'll agree with this, but to me, it doesn't matter how ridiculous. People can be jerks. The customer is always right. The customer is not always right. There are unreasonable people in the world. And sometimes you get complaints from the most unreasonable people. And okay, so I'll use my rental property. I had one, I'm not going to go into the details, but somebody made such a ridiculous complaint. And I thanked them. I'm like, you know what? That is such good feedback. I want you to know that I'm so glad that you brought that up. I am absolutely in agreement with you. I wasn't. Because one complaint that rips you to pieces does more damage than you can ever get out of online. And so that's why if you're going to refund, if someone wants a refund, unless it's a $20,000 product, give them the refund, because the complaint will hurt you more than any small to medium amount of money. But I'm curious to know what you think about that.
Yeah. It's too much power in the hands of the users or the customers.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is. Yeah,
it's Google. Google don't generally give you an opportunity to review your reviews. If you feel like I've had my own family business get bad reviews from people who didn't work with the company. Mm-hmm. So there was no interaction for them with the company to actually leave a review. Google deemed that we reported it, and then never got a reply from Google. To me, that's criminal. I mean, to be able to detrimentally affect someone else's business by just posting a bad review that's a fake review, and get away with it is criminal. You really and people don't understand that's affecting your organic traffic, which SEO and organic traffic to me is your online market share.
It's your lifeblood of your business. Yeah.
So the fact that Google don't take that seriously is pretty disappointing to me.
It is. It's almost like everything that I said, I stand fully behind, and it's a complete compromise. Like people, unreasonable people should not have the, control to damage your business so much, but it's also, if I had a client, I'd be like, I know where you're standing. You're morally, this is outrageous. You are outraged. You have a right to be outraged. But 8 months from now, will your outrage be quelled if you generated $10,000 extra sales just by dealing with this as you have to deal with it? And I feel it's one of those areas, like, because of Google, because you can't respond to the reviews, you just have to, it's an area where you have to empathize to the customer beyond the point of being reasonable, but to your own benefit. And I'm not talking about people do have legitimate complaints, like sometimes it is a
Yeah,
legitimate complaint.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And they should be dealt with. They should be seen. But
exactly.
it just goes against human nature
Yes.
to let the person that's done wrong be right. It's just something that's a difficult pill to swallow.
Yes.
And if anybody else can get over that, kudos and props to you. I still haven't been able to get there yet, but yes, long term, you will make more money if you get rid of your bad reviews than if you try and go head to head with these people.
Exactly. Well, I think we have so much more to talk about. Fergal, I'm hoping you'll come back and we'll chat again in the future. I hope our viewers, if you've watched, have learned something. I mean, there's just so much to talk about launching an e-commerce business. It's almost too big of a no, it is certainly too big of a topic to tackle in one discussion. Fergal, I want to thank you for joining. Before you go, if you have anything that you want to talk about or plug or talk about your website or your company, I'll give you a moment to do that now.
Well, thanks very much for having me, David. Yeah, people can find me at numinix.com. Would be the main point of contact.
Can you spell that out?
There, you'll get
Fergal?
to me or my team. Sorry?
Can you spell that out, Fergal, so people, just in case they...
Numinix, NUMINIX.com. Thanks, David. It's a difficult one. And from there, I can help with, as I mentioned before, any e-commerce platform. We do have one of our own e-commerce platform in the works. It's been beta tested and we're launching this year. So if you want to get onto that, it's probably going to be the fastest e-commerce platform on the market, and it's fully open API, so 100%, not 90% like some of its competitors. And I can do digital marketing, SEO. Not personally, I have a team. You come to me, I'll answer your question and I'll send you in the right direction, whether it be a service we offer or one of my trusted partners like merchant accounts. That's it. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Fergal. This was an awesome discussion. To anybody viewing, thanks for listening here and have a great day.